Hi team, this is Shagor with Actually Learn again. Just want to let you know we're still waiting for a few more attendees to join in. So give us a few more minutes and we'll get started soon. Thank you. Hi team, this is Shagor with Actually Learn. We're waiting for a few more attendees to join in, so just give us 2 more minutes and we'll get started. I'm starting to see more attendees join, so let's give others some time and we'll get started shortly. Thank you. Okay, team. It's about uh, 8:37 Pacific Standard Time, so we can get started. I'm sure others will be able to join us as we go along. But I just want to welcome everyone to Orientation Day 2 session of Devops Weekend Batch Training. And just want to start off by just reviewing what we went over in the first orientation session. We spoke about what is the DevOps process and why it is important, why it is in demand, why employers are looking to implement this process into their into their process of application development. We also discussed the topics briefly, which we are looking to cover in this training. This training will be not just theoretical, but it will be practical. It will be hands-on. We will go over the tools, and we will get a good understanding of the tools and how to use them. So these are some of the things we went over. DevOps, it's a software development approach, and we went over all these things in the last video. If you haven't had the chance to join us, please do review the video. It should be available on our website. And we basically spoke about the DevOps lifecycle, what is expected in the DevOps process, and we spoke briefly about the different roles, different teams that play a role into this approach, and that basically is the development team, the operations team, and of course the QA team. Now, today's session, we are basically looking to go over an example where everything that we spoke about, or at least most of what we spoke about in the last session, will come into a little bit clearer picture, and we can understand exactly how and why we use this process, right? So when we talk about the process, the DevOps process, a lot of companies basically they call it a pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD, of course, stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment, and we did go over the CI/CD process briefly in the last session. But in today's session, we're basically going to just go over a diagram. We're gonna create a diagram, and we're gonna just walk through each step in the CI/CD process, the pipeline, and basically go from there. So let's see here. Give me 1 second. All right. So basically, to start off, first I wanted to say that um, we have taken the Selenium training. At least most of us are aware of writing the Selenium scripts or even UFT scripts. Does not matter, but your automation scripts, right? So up to now, if you haven't had the chance to look into DevOps, you know how to create your automation scripts. You're ready to basically run them and perform your tests, your system testing. Now, with this approach, with the DevOps approach, what we're introducing or what we're going to look at is basically after you have created all your automation scripts, what process to follow, right? And so basically what happens is, first I wanted to start off with saying, with showing you that, remember in the last session we talked about how there's a dev team, right? And then there's operations or support, right? Oops, sorry. Okay, and then there's a QA team, and of course, as I mentioned, there's a project manager for every project, right? So in this diagram, we also talked about how we go from the development environment, right? We basically have to go through um, integration testing, right after the developers have written their individual codes for each, each part of the application, right? And then we go through system testing, and then eventually it goes through user acceptance testing, right? And then eventually it's released into production. So keeping this in mind, right? Keeping this for, especially these three teams in mind: development, operations, and QA. And keeping this in mind, this is the pipeline we're talking about. This is CI/CD pipeline, and basically this needs to happen automatically and continuously. So having said that, let's try to go into let's try to open up a new diagram here. And let's see. Okay. And so what happens is basically when the developers have finished writing their codes, right? So what they do is they um, check in their code into what's called a source code management system. So it's SCM in short, source course management. Source code management, or you can call it a VCS, which is a version control system. And when we talk about version control systems, the most popular one, the most widely used tool as of now is basically Git and GitHub. Right? And we will talk about Git and GitHub more when we start working this tool in our future session. But for now, all you have to keep in mind, it's a version control system. And what it is basically, let's say there's three developers, right? And three developers have three different codes that they're putting into the version control system into Git or GitHub. Now here, what happens is Git and GitHub will store the different versions. As they continue to make changes and come up with new versions of the code, it will store all the different versions for management and for future retrieval, and of course, quick access and all of that. Now, this is not the only tool in the market. There are other tools such as I think there's what is it? One second. Okay, so one tool would be Perforce. There's tools such as um, Visual Source Safe, which is I think by Microsoft. So Visual Source Safe, right? And there's also a tool like Source Depot, or SD for short. So basically, thing to keep in mind is that it's not the only tool in the market, and there are other tools. But why Git and GitHub is widely used and widely I guess popular is because when we talk about version control system, there's a difference between um, a centralized version control system and a distributed version control system. Again, we will go over that in the future, but that would be like a difference between a tool like Perforce and Git and GitHub. So just keep that in mind, that there are other tools, but Git and GitHub definitely does have advantages over the others. We will talk about the version control system in the future. So what happens after the developers have checked in their code into this version control system, or the source depot, where all the source codes are stored, right? Let's say we have a company, and for this process, what they do is they schedule this at 5 p.m. By the way, the developers that I mentioned, Dev1 and let's say Dev2, Dev3, right? Now each one of them, let's say, are in different uh, time zone. So meaning this person is in US, this person is in India, right? and this person is in UK, right? Now, all three of them obviously have different time zones, and they're almost opposite time zones. So if it's daytime here, it's nighttime there, so obviously keep that in mind. Now, let's say US time, 5 p.m., the company decides that we're going to have all the developers, whoever's working on the code. So what happens is, let's say we're working on a running application, but the new changes came in, and developers need to work on the small changes, and they have to upload the changes by 5 p.m. US time, um, by the deadline, which can happen daily, which can be weekly, whatever the case is. So in this case, let's say this is happening daily, right? Every day, if any change comes in, developers need to finish working on their part, working on their changes on their individual unit, complete their unit testing, and checking their code into Git and GitHub, right? Now, after that, what happens is um, these codes, now, sometimes they generate, a executable file like a jar file or WAR file. And if that's the case, basically, this next step will not be needed. But let's just assume, keeping things generally in perspective, let's say here, what we have is this code needs to be retrieved from this source code management system. It needs to be retrieved, and it needs to be basically built. Actually, not built, I'm sorry, not yet, but compiled. The code needs to be compiled. And when the code gets compiled, so let's say this is step one, right? So what we do here is check out the code. Sorry. Check out the latest code. So whatever, if there is a change, then basically it will be checked out from Git, and then I'm just going to use Git for our example because that's what we're going to cover in this training. And basically what happens is check out the latest code from Git and compile to get an executable file. Okay, now what's the purpose of this? Because until you get an executable file, it cannot be built properly. The code needs to be built, and that's the next step. We'll go into that in a second. But for now, just keep in mind that this needs to be compiled. The code needs to be compiled. Now, this happens automatically, right? I'm just gonna draw a line here so it doesn't get confusing. And basically, this is happening at 5 p.m. This is happening, let's say, at 6 p.m. Okay, and this is again US time. So the developers in the other time zones, obviously, they have to coordinate, and they have to, um, you know, uh, work according to the US time zone. But basically, here is when we are compiling the code. Now, again, like I was saying, this happens automatically, and this is usually happening through running automatic shell scripts or Python scripts, for example. And basically what's happening, the code is automatically checked out from Git. It will check, a Git and see if there's a new change. If there is a new change, then the code will be, obviously retrieved and compiled. Now, once this happens successfully, we get an executable file, like I said, either a jar file or a WAR file for web applications. And then if it's it could be MSI file, or it could be if it's a service, so that's pretty much it. So after this has been completed successfully, um, again, actually, before I talk about the next step, what I want to say is here at this step, let's say when the developers upload their code into GitHub, right? They're checking their code, let's say. And when this step takes place at 6 p.m., when the automatic scripts are ran, the shell scripts are ran, if there's any compilation error, what happens is the script will send an email to corresponding owner of this process, right? If someone, most likely from the operations team, will be available to monitor those emails. They will have a 24/7 schedule. They will have a rotating schedule to make sure there's enough coverage, make sure someone is there to pay attention to these emails. And what happens is, the email will be sent saying that, hey, there's an issue. So this person, whoever is in charge, will basically reach out to the developer. So let's say there's a problem here, right? So there's a problem here. Actually, I shouldn't do that. Let me do this instead. So let's say here it failed, and what happens is the operations guy, the person, right, whoever is in charge, will contact this developer. So in this case, it's developer 2, and say, hey, something is not working properly, something is wrong with your code. Now, it's very important when the developers check in their code, they need to make sure that they complete their unit testing. Right now, unit testing, let's say they have checked everything has passed, but sometimes when you integrate everything and you try to compile it, things can go wrong. So operations team will have to reach this person and say, hey, can you take a look at your code that you submitted today? Something's not right. Can you fix it? Now, let's say this developer is in India, and at 5 p.m., it's, I guess midnight there, it's middle of the night, and this developer is not available, right? Now, also keep in mind, no one here has to be in the office when we're following this process, right? Whenever we're using this tool and whenever we're using the Devops process, no one has to be in the office. So the operations guy does not have to be in the office. The developer does not have to be on site, and QA team does not have to be in the office either. As of now, we still don't have the QA team in the picture. But for now, just keep in mind that the operations, person, whoever is in charge of this project, of this process actually, they will get the email and they can send an email out to the developer and say, hey, can you fix it? Now, developer, if available, they can fix it and they can, submit the new change and say, hey, can you rerun the process now? Right now, when the process is rerun and it passes, then it produces the executable files. But let's say the developer is not available. So what happens is now DevOps come into the picture. Now, again, as I mentioned last time, this is basically a combined effort of some developer process and some operation process, as the name suggests, right? Now, what this means is developers should know some of the operation side tools and process, and operations team should know the developers tools and some of the process. When this happens, when we have a DevOps team, right? Whenever everyone is following in this project, everyone is following the DevOps process and they're familiar with the tools. This way, the operations team does not have to bother this developer if it's something that they can fix, right? So they don't need to contact them. They can just fix the issue themselves if it's something that is within their scope, within their capability, and they can rerun the process. And again, we don't have to bother the developer at all. So let's say now, in this process that we spoke about, right? When the what do you call it? When the executable files are created, right? Now what we have to do, this would be our second step, and this is basically we take that executable file and we have to generate a proper build. Okay, now I'll explain what I mean by that. Whenever we generate a proper build, what this means is that you have to, if there's any installable files that needs to be installed, like MSI files, if it's a service, to be able to build it as service, to deploy to a server either on the client side or the server side, right? So anything like that, anything thing that we need to include with this executable file in order to get it ready for deployment, that's that's basically what's happening at this step, right? And let's say this is scheduled for 7 p.m., right? 7 p.m. So now after this step, sorry, by the way, if anything is not properly built here, for some reason there's an issue here, there's an error, for some reason things are not being built properly. Now, this will be fixed by the operations team in general. But again, in the DevOps process, even a developer can take care of this issue because they're aware of the operations process, right, and the tools. So if they know exactly what's going on here, why we're getting the error, and they're able to fix it, they can fix it. So even though this is an operations, ownership, developer can take care of it. And in this case, even though this was, ideally or primarily a developer responsibility, an operations team can take care of that, right? So now, after this, what happens? Let's say at 8 p.m., right? We're scheduled to take this build. Once it's been built properly, what we do with this is basically we deploy it, right? This needs to be deployed into the system environment, right? Now, why we do this? We need to deploy, the executable files like the jar, the wire files, MSI files, services, and what we do is we deploy it into system environment, and this can ideally be a server, or a virtual machine on the cloud. Sorry, 1 second. Server or VM, virtual machine in the cloud. And what happens now is the code has been compiled, it's been built, now it's been deployed into a system environment. At this point, a QA, or the QA team will be notified, right? Will be notified at this point saying that, hey, we have generated this, build number, so and so. So let's say build number 1.12, has been deployed, right? And now you can do your system testing because it's ready for system testing. So what happens is, again, at this point, if there's any errors or any issues, operations team, or the dev team can take a look at it and see what's going on. But if it's deployed successfully, then what will happen at this point, the QA will come into the picture and say, okay, now since we have this ready, we can, this will be scheduled from before. It's not something they will do right there and then, but QA team will be basically getting ready for their automation scripts to be ran, right? So whatever automation script they have prepared, they will have it ready. They will have it, ready to be ran automatically at 9 p.m. because that's how we schedule everything, right? All these steps is scheduled prior to all the steps taking place, and then it's happening automatically. So what happens here, as I mentioned, this is step 4, right? And we are basically, what we're doing, we are running our our automation script. So it doesn't have to be Selenium, it can be UFT or Selenium or any other tool that is compatible, or that is compatible with this process, with the tools that we're looking at. If they're DevOps compatible, then basically those scripts will be executed at this point. So run automation scripts, and this will happen automatically, as I mentioned. And then eventually what happened is, after it's ran, the report will be sent to everyone. So the development team, the operations team, the QA team, the rest of the QA team, and as well as the customer, will actually no, the customer will not get a message at this point because at this point it has not been deployed to the UAT environment or the production environment. So at this point, it's just basically whoever is involved up to now, operations team, development team, and the QA team, and basically it's going to say that this version of build so and so has been passed. It has gone through the system testing, all the automation test scripts, how many test scripts you have, 100, 500, more than that, whatever all the automation scripts the QA has prepared. And by the way, they have to prepare this properly, so it can be ran. It's compatible with the tools, as I mentioned, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But just know that we have to. The QA is responsible for, getting the having the automation scripts ready for this step, so it can be executed automatically. Now, let's say at this point, what happens is after the report has been sent out to everyone, and let's say there is no issue, and obviously if there is an issue, the QA team will have to take a look and see what scripts are failing, where the testing is halted, if there's any roadblocks, they have to work on getting that resolved. But let's say, and once they fix it, obviously the process will be reran and we can move forward. But let's say everything passes, then at 10 p.m. what happens is we schedule for the build, right? We already created the build after compiling, and we also deployed it into the system environment, and then we also ran the test scripts. Everything has passed, and at this point, what happens is we're going to deploy it again, but not in the system environment. We're going to deploy it into the user acceptance testing environment. And now this is basically for for the purpose of completing our user accepted testing, of course. But at this point, let me just write this down. Deploy into UAT environment. And now we're going to inform everyone again, but this time we will include the customer as well, because the customer can then work on getting the UAT scripts to be ran. Everyone and customer, okay. And so one common question is like, hey, are the customers going to, is the QA team going to create these UAT scripts, right? The answer is no. The customer, or sorry, whoever is going to perform the UAT testing, or sorry, user acceptance testing, they're going to be primarily responsible. But having said that, the QA team obviously will have a framework built by now, and they can use the same pattern, same, and QA can help in order to basically help the customer getting ready for this step. But again, it's something that they will have to work on. And once this is done, once the deployment has been done into the UAT environment, again, they're going to get the email saying that it's ready for testing now. You can run your UAT scripts. So at this point, basically, the UAT scripts are being ran, and then we can again expect everything to pass or fail. If anything goes wrong, they will take a look at their scripts and see if there's an issue. They will fix it. But if everything passes, basically we move on to the next step. Now, this is 11 p.m. Let's say we schedule this, right? And here, what's happening is, as a final step, we're going to basically deploy this into production. Deploy into production. Okay, and this is obviously the production environment. All right, deploy this into production. The application is production ready. Customers can start using it. So this is basically our home run. This is our final step. If everything is good, we can get to this step and we're golden. Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned before, this process this same process, has been used before. It's been used in the, let's say in a waterfall model. This may happen every quarter, every 6 months, right? But in an agile environment, or even in the DevOps environment, this can happen bi-weekly. It can happen weekly. It can happen on daily basis. It can even happen multiple times a day, because think about big companies like Amazon, Facebook, Walmart. They need to make sure any changes or any errors that need to be fixed can happen quickly and right away, and needs to be tested and deployed, and all the things that need to be configured, all this needs to happen very, very, very quickly. So this can happen multiple times a day. Now, in the DevOps environment, this happens automatically, as I mentioned. All of these steps are being ran through codes, like I said, shell scripts or Python scripts. And basically, it's been done automatically. The reports has been sent automatically by the scripts. The person who's in charge will have to, look at it and work on a resolution as quickly as possible. And the benefit of having a DevOps team is basically, the developers, the operations team, and the QA team, right? If they're DevOps trained, if they know the tools, right? So now, instead of just depending on one department, you have three different department, right? And in every department, obviously, there's more than one team member, and now you have just more people that are capable, and they're able to fix these issues. So this is why DevOps is important, why it is in the picture, why it's being, I guess, desired by a lot of companies, why it's making a huge, progression in the QA industry, right? Not QA industry, but application software engineering industry in general. So this is when an employer let's say interviews you for your next position or next job that you're looking for, they obviously will take a look at this and see if you're DevOps trained or even have experience in DevOps. Obviously you have a little bit upper hand against the other candidates. So, this is something that is, being looked at every day by employers, by employees. A lot of companies are looking to integrate the DevOps process into their current process. A lot of new companies are building their, basically process according to this process, using the DevOps tools and all of that. And basically, this is why DevOps, is playing a major role in the software industry at this point. And this is why I said this is something you definitely want to add to your resume. But again, while we look at this diagram, I also wanted to point out we did talk about the tools that's used in the DevOps process. Now, whenever we're talking about DevOps tools, keep in mind. Sorry, one second. All right, so DevOps tools, as we discussed, tools like Jenkins. Sorry, one second. Jenkins, Git and GitHub, right? What else did we mention? Git and GitHub, and then tools like Dockers. These are DevOps tools that we use. Now, in the CI/CD pipeline, we also use obviously all the ones that I just mentioned, all the, oops, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so CI/CD includes the DevOps tools and also Maven. Now, tools like Maven, where is it used? Whenever we're working, when we're talking about, basically the QA team, whenever they, when the developers, whenever they're checking into their code into Git or GitHub, right? They they most likely would be using tools like Maven to make sure that it's it's in that format. Basically, they as far as the DevOps process is concerned, even if you don't use Maven or you use a different tool, different build tool, or even let's say if you don't use those tools at all, you can still follow this process. But using Maven, tools like Maven, especially Maven, definitely has some advantages. And in the future session, and probably on the next session, we'll definitely get to talk about Maven, and the benefits of it, and exactly how to use the tool and all of that. But just keep in mind that the tool is being used by developers to follow a certain format. In that fashion, they can submit their code into Git. Now, what about the other tools? Again, right here, Git is being used. Git and GitHub is being used to store the code and eventually to basically host that code for others to retrieve that code from other locations. So after that, what happens is configuration management tools come into the picture here whenever things are being built and configured and basically getting ready for deployment. So tools like we talked about, like Dockers, right? Uh, those tools will definitely come into the picture at this step. And Jenkins, for example, Jenkins, all of this scheduling like 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., right? As well as running the automating or automated scripts, all of that is managed in Jenkins. So whenever in the future session, when we start talking about Jenkins and start looking at the tools, we'll get to see exactly how to schedule it and how to run the jobs and all of that. So having said that, I think that explains all the tools at each step whenever we use it. Obviously here we're still using the scripts, the Python scripts or shell scripts to run this automation scripts and all of that, right? So after this, now what I would like to cover is let's see. Yeah, just keep in mind that this process, it goes automatically, and then it goes it goes in a step-by-step process, and anything goes wrong that needs to be fixed, and eventually the process can continue. Now whenever the next change comes in, we start here again. Let's say the next day, right? We start here again. Developers, well, actually not even here. It starts sorry. It starts here when the developers have to write their code, eventually submit their code after that, and then eventually this step will continue. So just keep that in mind. And having said that, uh, now we can basically open up the floor for any questions you guys may have. I'm sorry, I know there are some questions there. And the question is, Anil is asking, what language should QA need to know for the tools to master? Okay, so as far as languages go, like I said, some Unix, Linux commands, basic commands we need to know. Other than that, like the shell scripts, what I'm referring to. Other than that, obviously, whatever automation tool you're using, obviously that's separate from this, and you need to be able to know those tools. But as far as just the DevOps tools itself, and what do you call it, DevOps tools, and just following this process, you just need to know how to use these tools. There's not necessarily any language that needs to be that you need to know, but basically just know how to use these tools: Jenkins, GitHub, Maven, right, and Dockers, things like that. So it's not, as far as coding goes, it's just the basic shell scripts. All right. I hope that answers your question, Anil. If you have any other question, please do let me know. Okay, sure, you're welcome. All right, so now I'm hoping that this diagram that we just went over, I hope this, I guess paints a much clearer picture in everyone's mind as far as, the DevOps process, exactly what's happening step by step. And obviously this is a general discussion, general, I guess, explanation that I have provided. Now, some process may not need to go through this step, for example, right? Because whenever the code is compiled, it automatically generates a jar file, or for web applications, a wire file, and eventually you can skip this step and you can go here. But just to keep it, in general, keep things in generally in perspective, we need to make sure the code after it's being compiled is also being built properly. Okay, so all right. So now, anyone else have any questions? Please do, feel free to bring it up. And as I mentioned before, from next session, things will get more practical. We will be working with either Maven or GitHub. I'm not sure which is the best approach for us, but we'll definitely, explore one of those tools. And we will continue looking into this process in a much more practical manner. So we'll get some hands-on experience with the tools, how to use it, what the benefits are, and as far as the QA goes, what they're, we're going to go over all the things that the QA needs to know. So basically, we'll get to look at the QA roles by practicing at the same time. Okay, so I know last session I didn't go over the QA roles so much, but as you can see from today's session, QA will come into the picture here, right? And basically stay all through, actually not even through here, like up to here. But they will also be available here just in case if the customer has any issues, running the UAT script and they need some help. The QA team might, help a little bit. But after here, that's when QA is basically coming into the picture. All right, so next question, let's see. We have a question from Anil again. How long this DevOps be in the future? So Anil, this DevOps process, it's not very old yet. It's fairly new. A lot of companies have implemented this, they embraced this process, and a lot of companies are in the process of incorporating these changes, to include this process into their current team, current process. So as of now, the future is bright for DevOps, and there's definitely an increasing demand for DevOps skills in the job industry, in the QA industry, in the software engineering industry. If you're a developer, if you're a system admin guy, if you have operations experience, all of this is basically playing a major role. So again, it's not just the QA team that is learning these tools. Developers and especially the operations team, they're learning this as well. Maybe even a little bit more than what QA needs to know. But the main objective is for everyone to be on the same same page and know all of these tools well enough to contribute, and basically just have this process work much more efficiently. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, I would say in the next several years, I think we are looking to, looking for, I guess, increasing demand in the DevOps field. So the future is bright as of now. All right. So next question from Anil: is this because of Agile process with every project nowadays, or anything else? Yes, so you are on the right track. The question is I did go over this in the last session. So basically, after what happened was, first we had the waterfall model, right? And then what happened after that? All the companies started going into the agile approach because it we're able to deliver to the customer much more quickly, much more frequently, and any changes or any fixes that needs to be made, everyone is actively working on it. Like I said, in some companies, things are being implemented or fixed, not just daily, but even multiple times per day. So this is definitely a big thing. Now after this is a step up, I would say, because now not only you're moving in an agile fashion when you're what do you call it, developing that application, but now you are taking this process from beginning to end, this whole process, right? You're taking this thing beginning to end and you're automating it. You're making it run automatically, making all the tools and the scripts and everything, all the builds, all the deployments, everything is being ran automatically, right? So my point is that yes, you're right. Because of agile, then what the company said, okay, now we can produce an application, or we can work on an application much more quickly. Now, how can we make this process even better? Why do we have to wait for a developer in India? Why isn't there someone else, or from the same team or from other team available to work on this, right? So now DevOps process came into the picture and said, okay, let's get everyone ready. It's just 3 more tools. We can all learn it. We can, all work on the same thing. And, just like a QA can schedule a job or schedule a task to be completed in Jenkins, a developer can do the same thing. An operations guy can do the same thing. So basically, everyone is following this process now. Until something better comes along, DevOps is definitely here to stay. It's definitely making a mark in the market, in the field. So definitely, keep an eye out for DevOps. All right. So I hope that answers your question. And I think, let me see. I think there was another question from Anil that says, Anil says, is this anything related to cloud computing too? Yes, absolutely. So tools like Git and GitHub, right? As I mentioned, their version control system. I also mentioned that this is more of a distributed version control system. And now we will go over what is the difference between a distributed version control system and a centralized version control system. But one thing to remember, all the codes that is being checked in, right, into the version control system. Actually, I made a mistake here. I'm sorry. 1 second. This is supposed to be VCS, version control system. Okay, so VCS. Now, in this version control system, the codes are stored into the cloud, and eventually, whenever required, it can be retrieved from any location. So cloud computing, not just cloud computing, but this cloud-based storing and I guess hosting system. These do definitely come into the picture. So same thing, with Jenkins. Everything is basically happening in the cloud. So yes, the answer is yes. Um, it has a lot to do with cloud computing also, right? And actually, I'll tell you one thing. Uh, I had this conversation a few years back, a good few years back, before I even learned about DevOps. And I had basically a friend that worked in the development area. And I was working on a different project, but he said, you know what, a lot of things are going to change. And I say, what do you mean? Like, in which direction, right? What are you referring to? So they said, that because of cloud computing, a lot of things can be taken care of by an operations team, or a person who's, I guess, developing the application. They're going to be able to take care of a lot of things that a QA does, and vice versa. Operations team can do a lot of things that developers can do. So at that point, yes, I had a picture. in my mind, but I didn't know exactly, how it would affect us in the QA industry. But yeah, now it's starting to make sense when we're looking at this DevOps process. We can definitely see how cloud computing is playing a major role, and then the agile approach came into the picture. That of course picked up the pace, and now you have DevOps. So obviously all of these things, there will be a better process later in the future. But as for now, this is something that is being incorporated by a lot of companies. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Anil. Anyone else have any questions? We can go over them, or we can end the session for today. In the next session, we can get right into the tools. And by the way, our next session, I'm not sure when it will be, but email will be sent out by IT Learn, and you will, get a link to register for the paid sessions. So from next session, it'll be paid sessions, and if you haven't registered, please do so, and we can get started. Okay, and we'll jump right into the tools, and we'll get to see how to use those tools, how it's going to basically improve our life. All right. All right, so let's see, any other questions? Okay, Anil has another question. In future, then there will not be any dev or QA. They're called the DevOps guy. You can say that, but not really, because obviously a lot of things developers do, QA is not prepared to handle. There are things that the QA team will handle, that is prepared to handle and is capable to handle, that the developers won't know how to do, or even have the desire to do so, because it's just two different worlds. But yes, if they can learn QA tasks, for example, they can take care of a lot of the QA, I guess, responsibility. But no, they cannot. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think QA will completely disappear, or development team will completely disappear, and it'll be just DevOps guy, right? I don't think so, because trust me, there's a lot of things that come into play as far as following this process step by step, because starting from development is a lot of work, right? Now you're talking about what do you call it? Compiling it, building it, then deploying it. So there's a lot of system configuration that comes into play. You have to containerize the tools necessary to run those, run that application in different environments. And then in different environments, different testing is being done. That needs to be taken care of by QA team or the UAT team, right? Customers eventually then get to play with the application, use the application in the production environment. But there's a lot of things that's going on here, and not one person or even just one team will be able to handle so many things, right? And no matter how much time developers spent on QA tasks or operation tasks, there will still be a lot of things that they probably will not be able to go over themselves. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. All right, now let's see. You're welcome, Anil. All right, so anyone else have any more questions? I hope this session was helpful. It was informative. Hopefully it was able to get you guys more prepared, or give you guys a better understanding how the DevOps process is being used and how it's being effective in the software engineering process. I really hope that that's the case. If not, once we start using the tools, it will start making more sense to you. At that point, we'll see exactly in this process how is Git and GitHub playing a role. How is Maven being helpful, right? And then again, like I said, we'll look at other tools like Jenkins. Jenkins is a major thing. One other thing I want you to keep in mind. I'll just open up a new page here. So basically what I'm referring to is, this is something I went over in the last session, but as I mentioned, in a software development project, right? Especially when we're following the DevOps approach. right? Basically, the developers will be working on planning on how to build the application. They have to write their code, right? Eventually, what happens is uh, this needs to be built, as I mentioned, right? Built, and then eventually the QA will have to test it, right? After you test it, basically what happens is you integrate all of this, and this is called integration, right? And here, what happens is after it's integrated properly, you have to deploy it, right? Deploy and then operate. Operate meaning, you have to take care of all the configuration management tasks and all of that, right? And then finally, most importantly, you have to monitor the product before you send it in production or even before it's ready for system testing or UAT, right? You have to monitor the health of the product. How is everything being created successfully? Has the code compiled successfully? Has the code been built? Has the application been built properly, right? So if any problem is found, then we have to go back here. Let's say if it's a development issue, we have to go back here, take a look at the plan, review the code, build it, and fix it, and then test it again. So this is just the continuous process. After you find an issue, it has to go back, and then after you finish everything, once you test it, you have to deploy it again, right? And it's just a continuous process. And this is what I want you guys to keep in mind as far as the DevOps approach. We just have to make sure it's being um, integrated continuously, deployed continuously, and that's why we call it CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. Okay. So any other questions, guys? Okay, another question. Oh, no, okay, sorry, we already went over this. All right, so I think there's no more questions. If you guys are okay, then we'll go ahead and end the session for today. Um, Thank you once again for joining our second day for orientation for the DevOps weekend batch, and looking forward to seeing you guys in the future sessions. Um, all right, so have a good day, have a good night wherever you are, guys, and we'll see you guys in the next session. Okay? Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.